Hey, I think I'm live. It's me, Vicky Marie, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this crazy world that we find ourselves living in. We're all just trying to get by, aren't we, as well as we can. Anyway, look at this picture. On the left, this man, Paul Fitzgerald, who was 30 years old at the time, murdered the man on the right, Richard Huckle, who was 33 years old at the time. They were both serving time for very serious crimes in Full Sutton Prison in York, in the north, I think we would say, of the UK. And not only did he red rum him, but he tortured him, he RAPD'd him, he violated him, he basically subjected him to a 90-minute ordeal. Terrible, isn't it? But if you knew who Richard Huckle was, the guy on the right, would you still think it was terrible? Or would you think it was karma and he had his just desserts? Can this kind of violent crime ever feel justified? Or was Paul Fitzgerald completely wrong to do what he did? Did he even do it because he cared about the crimes that Richard Huckle had made? Because he was responsible for very serious crimes himself. Let's chat. So yeah, this is a hell of a story. And like all the other stories that I always end up presenting to you, once I start researching them, other things come up and it expands into more stories and more interesting things. And I just, in the end, I didn't know where to start with this video. So I just wanted to start with the fact of that murder, which happened in prison on the 13th of October in 2019. That is when Richard William Huckle, who was an English serial child sex offender, was murdered very brutally by the other guy, by Paul Fitzgerald, who also was a very serious sex offender with many, many problems, issues, etc. How was it allowed to happen, for a start? Because this, don't forget, this happened actually in prison. Should we feel sorry for him? Do you feel like the prison guards maybe turned a blind eye? 90 minutes. 90 minutes this man was tortured. I can honestly say, after researching his case today, his offences, I'm struggling to find any sympathy for him. But just for the fact of normal, human decency, you can't revel in the fact that somebody suffered the way that Paul Huckle suffered. But you could argue that maybe it was karma for the way he'd made other people suffer. But anyway, hi, I'm Vicky Marie. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to all my subscribers. Let me put my banner on. All my subscribers, all my members, everyone who buys me a coffee or sends me a nice message, or I've had some lovely emails, some lovely messages today. Thank you so much. People who send me super stickers, PayPal me. It really does mean the world. I know that's an overused phrase, but it really does. Especially because sometimes you don't get such nice messages. You know, I put out a video this morning about Nicola Bulley. Oh my God, all the trolls come out from under the rocks, don't they? It's like, hi, we hate you, but we're still watching your channel after all this time. You know, we hate you and we hate what you've got to say about Peter Folding. And we hate what you've got to say about Nicola Bulley, but we're still watching. You know, it's just incredible. But anyway, so all of you that didn't do that, that said nice things or sent me nice emails or, you know, etc. Thank you so much. And I've got to say, a few of the trolls that came out today, it didn't put me off. It made me feel better because I thought I must be doing something right. If all the trolls are coming back out of under their rocks again about the Nicola Bulley case, you know, why are people so sensitive about it? I mean, you know, I wasn't saying anything bad about anyone. I'm just going over the case, you know, and people come out and they're like really sensitive. And that makes me feel sometimes that I am, you know, striking a chord with people, because if you don't strike, why do people even care? You know, these trolls, why do they care now, all this time later? Why are they still interested? We know why we're still interested in Nicola Bulley, because we feel like there are things that haven't been resolved. Might be different things, we have different views, but I think most of us feel that there's something wrong, something that hasn't been addressed, something that hasn't been, you know, resolved. But I don't understand what, you know, these trolls, they've got what they wanted. They got the inquest result. It was accidental death. Why even bother? But anyway, there you go. There's no accounting for taste, is there? And there's no arguing with stupid. So, you know, one of these trolls, sorry, I've just got to mention it, was sort of having a go at another of my chatters about, oh, get a life. But this person's name, you know, well, YouTube name, obviously not their real name, was Man in Black. So they've chosen the YouTube name Man in Black. And when I sort of challenged them about that and said, well, why are you calling yourself the Man in Black? They said, well, I am a black man. Honest to God, you couldn't make it up. But anyway, let's forget that. Let's forget them. And let's get on with this story, because it's a very important story. It happened quite a while ago, but I think it's important. And what I find important about this story is Richard Huckle, the guy on the right. Now, he's probably one of the worst sex abusers in British history. He's British. He's not an immigrant. And in fact, he went over to other countries. So you could say he was an immigrant in other countries to abuse children. And he even wrote like a manual to put on the dark web of how to do it, how easy it was. So easy. Go to a poor country. Go to it. You can't get away with it in the UK, according to him. This is his own words in his own manuals that he made and he put on the dark web. Now, I have not been onto the dark web to try and have a look or read any of the things that he said. But that's how he was caught. And he was actually caught, even though he's British. He was born in Ashford in Kent. So he's a British-born abuser, you know, not an immigrant. He was actually caught by the Australian police. It was the Australian police that were doing, I don't know, some sort of what would you call it? They were trying to catch child lovers, and he was one of the people that came up in their inquiries, and that's how he was caught. And then it turned out he was a photographer, or supposedly a photographer, who went out to these poor countries as a Christian missionary. He also did an English course, like to be a CELTA teacher. And believe me, these sort of courses like CELTA, etc., they're not difficult. They really are not. What I'm trying to say is you don't have to go through 3 years of training to be a CELTA teacher. You do an online course. It's like the TEFL courses. I think TEFL is only about 2 weeks or something. Then you've got a certificate saying that you're an English teacher. You go off to these countries. He combined it with missionary work because he was very involved with the church, and then abused probably 200 children from poor, from poor sort of families. His modus operandi would go onto beaches in Malaysia or whichever country he was in. He would go onto the beach. He would approach a family with children. He would say, "Oh, I'll take some photos, free photos." And then he'd get chatting to the family. Then he would offer them free English classes. And of course, the families he was, a middle class boy with disposable income. And he would offer them sometimes money maybe to stay with them, because he would say he was looking for somewhere to stay. And while he was there, he would teach their child English free. And while he was doing that, he would take photos of them, indecent photos of them. He would upload them on the dark web. He would then show them to, he would hold the child in his thrall. He abused children from babies to sort of early adolescence. And one particular girl that was well documented because he had lots of photos, etc., a bit Stephen Sternish in that way, made sure he had a record of everything he did. She was 3 years old. And he would make her watch these things with him or look at these photos with him, etc. Anyway, a few of the families did become suspicious, but who listens? Who challenges a Christian missionary, middle class, all British boy? Who questions them? These poor families, they're not listened to. And he actually said that in his manual for how to get away with being a P, basically. Go to a poor country, and that's how you do it. Don't try and do it in Britain because, you can't get away with it, but you can go to these poor countries and get away with it. Some places that he went to where he was actually employed for his English, teaching English, he was actually being paid for abusing their children, because some more affluent families did pay him. So they were paying him to teach their children English. And at the same time, then he was abusing their children. So he was virtually getting paid for abusing them. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible story. And I think it's just to be looked out for. It's not all, as we say, not all bad people are, like some sort of drooling immigrant who's come over. And that's not the way it is. This guy was a middle class young lad from a good family, not a single parent family, like some people blame single parents. Not a single parent. He had 2 parents. He had every opportunity to, have the best life he could have. And he was just bad. And he set off on this course of going to impoverished places and working with impoverished children with the guise that he was doing it for their good, to impress, to help, when really he was doing it for his own benefit, because he knew if he went to poor countries, he would not get questioned. And the church did not question him either. And even when it all came out in the end, the church tried to cover it up, as they do. And this is the whole problem with the church these days. People don't trust churches. They don't trust religion because of bad things that have happened, and there's no comeuppance. Now, in the opposite, Paul Fitzgerald, who also, the guy who eventually sort of took Richard's life in a very brutal, awful way, he wasn't exactly a good person either. Of course he wasn't. He'd done some terrible things, which is how he ended up in Full Sutton prison. Now we're going to have a look at the prison itself. Full Sutton prison in York is a prison that the highest offenders... Oh God, I've got the hiccups, sorry. How's it getting the hiccups on a live stream? So, my gosh. Full Sutton prison in York is a prison where there's a lot of high profile offenders. Hang on, let me have a bit of water. There's a lot of very violent offenders in Full Sutton prison. And Full Sutton prison has got a reputation for violence amongst the prisoners, etc. And that is where Richard Huckle ended up, and that is where Paul Fitzgerald ended up. So we'll be talking about Paul Fitzgerald a little bit as well, and the crimes he did. He's still alive, Paul Fitzgerald. He received another 30 odd years. He was already serving life, I think, but he received a sentence of another 30 odd years for killing Richard. And as I say, he didn't only kill Richard, he tortured him. He, subjected him to 90 minutes of various torture. And I can't help but think, where were the prison guards when all this was happening? Did they, step aside and let it happen? I'm 100% certain that those kind of things happen in prison, where prison officers just turn a blind eye just for a little while. What do you think about that? Anyway, I'm just going to say hello to everyone before I start properly. Let's go to the beginning. So, hi BF, hi David, hi Fluffy. I love that Nick, that nickname, Fluffy Bunny. Hi Darren. Hi Chumba. I think I said hello to David. I think I did. So let's stay on theme. Richard Huckle. Oh, now before I start, there's a couple of YouTube channels that I just want to tell you about. And the reason is these are YouTube channels that I've been watching, like to get some more background. I mean, I knew about this case, but didn't know all the details. And I just want to show you these YouTube channels because I've been watching them today. And the first one that you may have heard of or may not have heard of, I'm not going to show the videos. I'm just going to show you them because I've used them for research. Now, this is the Law and Crime channel. Now, I'm not going into the true gory details and grit of these crimes, either of them, either the murder of Richard or what Richard himself got up to. But if you want gory details, then definitely go on watch The Predator Within the Christian Church, Richard Huckle, because I'll say he, it is a he. I think it's Brad Pitt. The other thing I'd like you to do is to go onto this YouTube channel. You never see the person's face, it's just the voice. But I swear it's Brad Pitt's voice. Honest to God, I'm 100% certain it's Brad Pitt. Anyway, so then that's a good, interesting video. And then another interesting video that I found is the gap year paedophile, because Richard Huckle, when he went on his gap year, that's when he went off to Malaysia and these places to abuse these children. That's why it's called that. Very good documentary. I think it's actually BBC documentary. So obviously I'm not going to show it because I'll get done for copyright. But if you want to find it, it's there on YouTube. Again, if you want the real gory details of everything, and some very interesting interviews with the churches that Richard Huckle had business with, had dealings with. Very interesting. Then I would recommend that you watch that documentary as well. So not yet though, because at the moment you're watching me, so I don't want you going over there yet. Just later, maybe, if you want some more information about this horrible story. So let's talk first of all about Richard Huckle. So who was he? Let's have a look at some other pictures of him. So we've got that picture of him there with the guy on the left is the guy who ended up murdering him. Let's have a look just at general images on Google. So this is him. This is obviously a prison photograph, I think, but then there's various photos here on the Google images. A drawing of him in church. Picture of him with a child, with the child's face obviously blocked out. So if you Google Richard Huckle, it will come up with a lot of information about him. A lot of information about him. Now, as far as we know, he didn't actually kill anybody. But, this must be his grave. Let's have a look. Find a grave. Oh, there's some flowers there. I don't know who's put that. That can't be him. That's got to be another Richard Huckle, because unless his mum's going to put some flowers on his grave at the end of the day, is her son, whatever. I mean, if she's a Christian, she's supposed to forgive, but it's very difficult. I do feel for these families. They're the other victims, aren't they? Because they're the people that have to live with the fact that someone they brought into the world, someone they gave birth to, has gone and done these terrible things. It must be a very difficult situation. I can't even imagine what it must be like. Okay, so let me just read you a little bit about Richard Huckle, and I'm just reading this from Wikipedia. He was an English serial child sex offender. He was arrested by Britain's National Crime Agency in 2014 after a tip-off from the Australian Federal Police. So really, if it wasn't for the Australian police, he might still be there doing whatever he was doing. So he was convicted in 2016. It just reminds me a little bit of Stephen Stearns, except Richard Huckle didn't do it in a family. Oh, but he was talking about getting married. He wanted to get married so he could have children, so he could abuse his own children. That's what he was planning on doing, finding someone to be his wife, so he could get married, he could have children, and then he could use those children, his own children. He wrote this in his journal. This is not, this is not speculation. This is literally what he wrote in his journal that he was planning to do. So good job he was stopped before he managed to do that, isn't it? So he was convicted of 71 charges of sex offences against children, and these were committed while he posed as a Christian missionary and a freelance photographer in Malaysia. He has been described by the press as Britain's most depraved P. And that's saying something, isn't it? Because what, more than Jimmy Savile? Anyway, on the 6th of June 2016, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years before he would be eligible for parole. Anyway, karma came to Richard Huckle in 2016, and I'm just giving you a little warning here because it does go into a few details. He was subjected to a prolonged torture murder in which he was tied up, beaten, strangled, assaulted in an sex way, and repeatedly stabbed. A blade was lodged in his brain through his nose. And this was all done by fellow inmate who at the time was 29 years old, Paul Fitzgerald, and he has since been charged with his murder. And as I said earlier, Fitzgerald had several previous convictions for violent and sexual offences. He was a horrible man, he'd done terrible things. I don't know if I think he had done them to children as well, but it seems like Fitzgerald, he didn't have the fantastic childhood that Richard Huckle had. You know, he did come from a deprived background, but even so, it's no excuse for the things he did. So he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years in 2020. So it'll be 2054 before Paul Fitzgerald is eligible for parole. So Richard Huckle was born into a middle-class family in Ashford in Kent on the 14th of May, 1986. He was educated at a grammar school. He was described as a bit of a loner, but nothing out of the ordinary. When he was 16, he took part in a month-long expedition to meet a school in Namibia, and then he began study at the nearby South Kent College. He was a regular worshipper at Ashford Baptist Church, and he was described as a quiet man. He worked part-time in Sainsbury's in the fruit and veg section from around 2003 to 2005. And he was a member of a church in London, which he continued to attend up to the time of his rearrest in December 2014. Because Richard Huckle, he was arrested first of all, and he was released on bail. This is me talking now, not Wikipedia. He was released on bail, and while he was released on bail, he got drunk one night and confessed to his mum that he had committed these crimes. And I don't know why he did that. You know, apparently he had a little bit too much to drink one night, and he came out and told his mum, or confessed to his mum, that it was true, that all these things were true. He had done them. So you can imagine his mum was absolutely distraught, gutted. She phoned the police immediately, and Richard Huckle was rearrested. Anyway, he went to Malaysia. Richard went to Malaysia in 2005. He spent his gap year there. And he returned to Britain regularly, helping out at local churches and amongst local communities. He did his CELTA course. He started work as a freelance photographer in local communities around Kuala Lumpur. and hoping to further his career and status within the community. He then enrolled for information technology. Imagine if it was today's day, in today's day and age, that Richard was out there. He'd be on TikTok, wouldn't he? He'd be on TikTok. He'd be doing his little videos in plain sight. That's what to me, he's like evil in plain sight. He was out there, like, pretending he was a good person, being a Christian missionary, and nobody suspected him, or nobody seemed to, except then it was just the Australian Federal Bureau that chased him down in the end. But yeah, if you would fast forward 10, 20 years or whatever, so this was 2011, so 10 years ago, fast forward 10 years, he'd be on TikTok doing all that, wouldn't he? Anyway, apparently he did some photography for Nike Football Club in Malaysia, but there's no reports of abuse from there. And apparently he kidnapped 2 sisters aged 4 and 6 in Cambodia in 2006. He then in India persuaded a pastor to invite him to an orphanage in Bangalore to make videos with the children, offering to make promotional videos for the orphanage. Now, when you think about it now, it's just like, and all the time that he was doing all these things, he was writing a journal or a manual on the dark web for other Ps, telling them how to get away with it, what to do, etc. Now, just let me go back in case I've missed anyone coming in. I'm pretty sure that I have. I'm going to just looking down the chat. Oh, hi, Jem. Hi, Pauline. Hi, KW. Hi, Old Bod. Hi, Maggie. So, he was doing all this in plain sight. I mean, literally in plain sight. And a lot of people from the villages, they did complain. They did have an idea of what he was doing, but the church turned a blind eye. Really, if it wasn't for the Australian Federation finding out about this, dark web, this underbelly, and this particular website, I suppose you'd call it. I mean, I don't know how the dark web works. I've never been on it. I don't want to go on it. I don't want to know anything about it. I'm not interested in the least. But it was a particular, let's see if I can find the name of the, not recommending you to go and look for it. I just want the name of it. There was a name of, the Love Zone. TLZ, the Love Zone, apparently this dark web network was called. And there was a task force Argus had been set up in Australia. It was called Task Force Argus. And they'd been made of a network of Ps operating on a dark web network called the Love Zone. And they noticed one member who always made posts using the unusual greeting Hayas. So not just higher, but plural, Hayas. And also that he had a distinctive freckle. Don't worry, it's not on his ujima it was on one of his fingers. So officers used social media and chat rooms to track down this individual, eventually finding a Facebook page that matched. The profile was fake, but photos of a vehicle led to police to Sharon McCool, a care worker from Adelaide, and a warrant was issued for the arrest of Shannon. A woman, for fuck's sake, Shannon. Do you know, talk about giving women a bad name. Oh my God. Anyway, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Shannon McCool. Oh, maybe it wasn't a woman. No, because then it says upon entering his house. Oh my God, I was thinking this can't be a woman. Because Shannon, you just think is a woman's name, don't you? But I don't think it was. But upon entering his house, police discovered that he was online and running his website at the time when they entered his house. Right, okay. So it must be a man. Shannon must be a man's name as well. Thank God for that. I mean, women sometimes are peas. I'm not saying there's no instances of that. Of course there are. Or if they're not peas themselves, they facilitate peas for some unknown reason. But anyway, police assumed the identity of Shannon McCool after he'd been arrested, and they ran his site to catch other peas. And they arrested hundreds, and they rescued 85 children from harm. I mean, that's fantastic, isn't it? And one of the people who stood out on his site was Richard Huckle, because there were so many children that he'd abused. They think it was 200 children, and also the attitude of his posts. And after discovering his real identity, they learned he was due to return to the UK to spend Christmas with his family and friends, and he was arrested on 19th of December 2014 at Gatwick Airport. And then, as I say, he was released on bail for some unknown reason, provided that he stayed at his parents' address. But then, while he was there, he got drunk. He admitted to his mum what he'd done, for whatever reason. Because the thing is, he had no previous convictions. He was like Mr. Whiter than White. You know, he's a middle-class lad from Ashford, Kent. You know, no reason. He'd never been... He had no criminal convictions, never mind with minors. He had nothing, not even a parking ticket. And also, he was not in a position where he was in contact with any minors. So these are the reasons that the police gave for giving him bail. But personally, as far as I'm concerned, if someone's, you know, being charged with 200 counts of child abuse, how would they get bail? I mean, they could just go out, take a child and murder them, couldn't they? Just think, oh, I'll have one last blast before I go to prison. Anyway, so that's how he got caught in the end. His parents refused to allow him in the house after he'd confessed. And they contacted the police and implored the police to arrest him. And so he was returned to police custody. And finally, I mean, I don't want to go into all the details of his offences, but finally he was sentenced, and he was sentenced for 71. He was sentenced, he pled guilty to 71 offences, but it's likely that there were 200. And he was sentenced to life imprisonment on 22 counts, minimum prison term of 25 years. But of course, it never came to that. Because while he was in prison, in Full Sutton prison, we're going to look at that prison now, he was subject to this brutal murder. It's difficult to feel sorry for him, isn't it? You know, and it really was horrible. 90 minutes torture. He was RAP'd. He had implements put up his back passage. He was had this knife forced into his brain through his nose, or a blade anyway. You know, and the guy who did it to him, you know, who you know, is obviously quite sick bunny himself, Paul Fitzgerald, said if he would have had more time, I mean, how much time do you need? He had 90 minutes, for God's sake. He said that if he would have had more time, he would have wanted to cook some parts of him and eat him. That was his fantasy. He's a very sick person, Paul Fitzgerald, and although he sort of claimed that he did it because he wanted Richard to feel what it felt like, I feel with Paul Fitzgerald, he was definitely abused himself when he was a child, because he made a comment like he didn't know what it felt like, but I did, and I wanted him to know what it felt like. So, that's what he said anyway. Okay, let me just come back to chat, make sure you're all okay. Looks like you are. Just make sure I've not missed anyone. So that's what happened. So let's have a look at this prison. So I think part of the prison, this Full Sutton prison that he was in, let's have a look at that. I think that's got a lot to do with it. I honestly think that probably in this prison in particular, and probably in most prisons, I do believe that quite often these prison officers turn a blind eye. I really do believe it. So this is where it is. I can't say His Majesty. The prison, Full Sutton, that's where it is. So it's near York. So that's the north, isn't it? York. I've been to York. It's not that far from Manchester. Yeah, you've got Manchester over there, Leeds, Sheffield, and this is where HMP Full Sutton is. Prison. So if you live around that area, quite often with prisons, you don't know they're there, do you? I mean, I always knew where Strangeways prison was in Manchester, though I think that's closed down. I used to go on the bus past it all the time, but, that was in a city centre. But I don't know if this is out in the country. Probably a lot of people don't even know it's there, because really, if you didn't know, Stamford Bridge, is that where Leeds play football, is it? I know someone plays football there, Stamford Bridge, because I've heard about it. Can't be Leeds, can it? Leeds is miles away, or is it? I don't know. Just don't know. But Stamford Bridge is definitely where somebody plays football, some Premier League team. It looks like it's quite, is it quite, just seeing what's around. Looks like it's sort of miles away from anywhere, doesn't it? Anyway, it's a high security prison. So the prisoners that are in there, they are like, serious prisoners. So let's have a look. Some of the prisoners that are in there and some of the things that we can find out about Full Sutton. So what we're going to look at are either people that are in there now. It's a category A prison. I must research about prisons because, I don't know much about prisons and who goes where and what decides where people go, etc. But Full Sutton is in a Yorkshire village. Oh, the prison in a sleepy East Yorkshire village. Oh, sorry, I need to share it. The prison in a sleepy East Yorkshire village, home to some of the UK's most notorious inmates. By the way, don't forget to like, please. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, please. If you're not a member yet, please consider becoming a member, and please consider supporting my channel in any way. Thank you. So Full Sutton is a category A prison housing some of the country's most dangerous criminals. Dennis Nielsen. Now we remember Dennis Nielsen, he's the Scottish serial killer who he is Scottish, but he went to London to sort of crime.
Well, since then we've had Liz Truss disaster.
Sorry, Angela, I love you, but I don't want to listen to you now. And Michael Stone, he is the guy that is reputedly under arrest, I say allegedly, he's been found guilty for murdering the mother and daughter, wasn't it? And they were out with their horse. Anyway, we're going to read about it. On first glance, Full Sutton is like any other peaceful village in the East Riding, with a lush village green and quaint houses. It looks almost idyllic, set on the outskirts of Pocklington. So this is another one for an on-location, I need to do a GoFundMe to go on location. I want to visit all these places. I think this would be an interesting on location, wouldn't it? But it also harbours the Category A Full Sutton Prison, a maximum security jail, which has been home to some of the most notorious criminals in British history. Don't you think that maybe the prison officers there, they think, oh, these guys are never coming anywhere. If the prisoners are a pain in the ass, they're probably like, that's probably when they turn a blind eye, isn't it, to things maybe. So from serial killers to terrorists, they are some of the most dangerous offenders to have been jailed in this country. Most are serving life sentences for their horrific crimes. Here we take a look at some of the grisly crimes the inmates committed before they were incarcerated in East Yorkshire. So we've got Jeremy Bamber. So Jeremy Bamber, he was the one that said that Bambi did it, his sister, wasn't it? He killed his family but said it was his sister. Bamber was convicted of murdering his adoptive parents, adoptive sister, and her 6-year-old twin nephews in 1986. The family was shot dead in Essex in August 1985 in what became known as the White House Farm murders. Bamber, who maintains his innocence, is serving a whole life term, which means he will never be released from prison. Prosecutors accused him of killing his family to secure a large inheritance, and then said he placed the gun in his dead sister's hands to frame her for the shootings. Yeah, he said she had mental health issues. This is the old chestnut, isn't it? She had mental health issues, and he said that she did it. Anyway, appeals against his conviction have failed. He served part of his term in Full Sutton, but he is now at Wakefield Prison. Michael Stone. Michael Stone has been convicted twice for the hammer murders of Dr. Lynn Russell and her daughter Megan. Now, this is a funny one, isn't it? Because there is talk, of course, that maybe Levi Belfield, who was a hammer murderer, was responsible for these deaths. But this guy has been tried twice. He has been convicted twice for these crimes. So whether that means he's guilty or not, I'm not really sure, to be honest. Yeah, but he has been convicted twice, that's all. But I don't know. I'd have to do a deep dive into that case, because I can honestly say I don't know enough details. I did know that Levi Belfield is also sort of suspected. It definitely is. Well, they say it definitely is. Oh, God, he killed a dog as well. It's not really Levi Belfield style, because Levi Belfield, crept up behind women, like girls on their own, off the bus and things like that. So as far as I know, Levi Belfield did not kill any young children. Of course, he killed Millie Dowler, who was a teenager. But again, she was on her own, wasn't she? She was a schoolgirl on her own. I don't know if this is his modus operandi, but I'd have to do a deep dive into it. It's possible. I'd have to look right into it. So the family was tied up with Stones's bootlaces. Were they definitely his bootlaces? Well, that would be a bit of a, you know, a giveaway, wouldn't it? If they were tied up with his bootlaces, it probably was him. And their dog lead before being struck with the weapon, that definitely is not Levi Belfield's style. You know, Levi would just go up behind people. He wouldn't do any tying up or anything like that. He took Millie Dowler to his flat, didn't he? Because at that particular, wasn't it, his girlfriend was away or whatever, and he had the opportunity. But most of his victims, he literally just went up to them, whacked him in the back of the head, a bit like the Yorkshire Ripper, really. Anyway, Lynn, Megan and the dog died while Josie suffered horrific head injuries, although went on to make a good recovery. Stone was arrested a year after the murders and was convicted and jailed for life. I've got to look at that case. I think that's a famous British crime, isn't it? And, you know, when I do the British crime, I think that deserves a good look at. At a retrial in 2001, he was again found guilty of the murders. You know, he did get a retrial then. So I don't know. See, I don't know. I don't know the full reasons why people think he deserves a retrial. But at the end of the day, if they were tied up with his shoelaces, well, you know. But anyway, I'll look into it. The High Court later ruled he should not be released until at least 2023. He is now 56. Well, I say he is now 56. When was this actual? So he's still quite young. I mean, he's got time to come out and have a life at least. This was 2021, so he's 59 now. Well, you need to get him out quick, and of course, you know, give him some compensation if he really is innocent. I mean, it's horrible to think of people being in prison, you know, unjustifiably, and that, of course, brings back the argument of the death penalty as well, isn't it? I mean, if we had the death penalty, he'd be dead by now, probably. Yeah. Anyway, Dennis Nielsen. I can't remember if I've done a video about Dennis. I don't think I have. Known as the Muswell Hill murderer, Nielsen was one of the most shocking serial killers in British history. He murdered and dismembered at least 12 men during a killing spree between 1978 and 1983. His victims were all strangled or drowned. And notice none of these are immigrants either. They're all British homegrown. Nielsen would then take part in a disturbing ritual in which he bathed and dressed the bodies before dissecting and disposing of the remains by flushing them down the toilet or burning them on a bonfire. And actually, this guy, he was only caught, wasn't he, because the drains got blocked up and the neighbours phoned the plumber. Yeah, he was caught after neighbours complained about the drains being blocked. Inside, human flesh and bones were discovered. He later admitted having sex with some of his victims after they had died. He was convicted of 6 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder in 1983 and jailed for life with a minimum of 25 years. He died in Full Sutton Prison in May 2018 from an aneurysm. So he's deceased now. He's, rotating in hell, I expect. He was that was a very strange case of Dennis Nielsen. He was obsessed with his grandfather, wasn't he? That he'd seen his grandfather when he was dead, and but he was just, so I really do believe some people are just born bad. I'm sorry, I do. Now, this guy's an interesting one. The next guy, Charles Bronson. Now, they're calling him Britain's most notorious prisoner. And of course, there was a big thing recently that he was applying for parole. And I don't know if you heard him being interviewed, and he's saying he hasn't actually murdered anybody. He has never RAP'd anybody. Not actually sure what he did do, to be honest. He obviously did some things. He did some very violent things. But he's been told he can't come out, and he's trying to come out. So he's been dubbed as Britain's toughest prisoner, and he's one of the most notorious inmates in the country. Although his crimes on the outside world were not as grave as others on this list, it's his behaviour inside prison that has made him a household name. Sorry, I was going to laugh there, and it's a nervous laugh. Because during a stint in Hull prison in the 70s, he held an art teacher hostage for 44 hours. Sorry, I mean, I'm a teacher. I'm a Spanish teacher. Imagine, I mean, I hope they pay them a lot of money to go. I can't imagine going in one of these prisons trying to teach someone Spanish or art or, God, how did he end up being able to do that? Where was the security? Where was the security? These people, teachers that go in and teach prisoners anything, because of course it's part of rehabilitation, isn't it? They get offered all sorts of educational things, don't they? And imagine, I'm just thinking about me being in there teaching Spanish, and then he held me hostage for 44 hours. Oh my God, you would absolutely SHIT yourself, wouldn't you? Dear me. So that's why they won't let him out then. That explains it. He later spent time in Full Sutton prison, where he reportedly covered himself in butter and attacked prison officers after Arsenal beat Hull City in the 2014 FA Cup final, angering Bronson, who was a Tottenham fan. Well, in a way, I can understand that. I can't bear Arsenal, so, no, I'm joking. It's a joke. But, yeah, God, fancy getting so angry about football that you actually, jeopardise your release from prison, covering yourself in butter. Goodness me. Anyway, apparently he married former Coronation Street actress Paula Williamson inside the walls of HMP Wakefield, but asked for a divorce after reports of her infidelity. She sadly died in July 2019. So who is Paula Williamson? I don't know who that is. I've got to have a look, see what character she played. So they're putting a stop to all that. I don't know if you've heard about that, because before I nearly started speaking in Spanish. Then I nearly said antes. As before, if you were in prison, you could get married. Like Levi Belfield, he was supposed to get married, wasn't he? And there's been a big fuss about it. Anyway, that's stopped now. It's been decided prisoners cannot get married. And, I completely agree with that. Imagine if you saw the person that had murdered your loved one, maybe a young person, your loved one was a young person, took away that fact they'd never be able to get married or have children, do all those things. And then you see the twonk that's done it to them. It's all over the papers that they're getting married. Talk about rubbing it in. Anyway, let me just show you this woman. This must have been Coronation Street after I stopped watching it, because I don't know who this woman is. Let's just look at images. Paula Williamson, and she married Charles Bronson. I don't know who she played. I've no idea. Her face doesn't look familiar to me at all. But the only thing I would say, she looks quite young, doesn't she? What happened to her? Let's have a look. Let's see what happened to her. Oh, she died of a drug overdose. Died after taking drugs and alcohol. got to stop doing all these adverts. No, thank you. So she was found dead in 2019. So he was still her next of kin because he was still married to her. Well, how old was she? 38. 38 years old, bless her. Anyway, so he married her inside the walls of HMP Wakefield, but asked for a divorce. Okay. Then we've got Colin Ireland. Now, they referred to him as the gay slayer, didn't he? Because he tortured 5 gay men to death in 1993. He met his victims in pubs and posed as a gay man to befriend them before killing them in their homes. He reportedly carried out the murders after making a New Year's resolution to become a serial killer. Now, I've been meaning to make a video about him for ages, actually, but I just haven't got around to it. But I will. It's on the list. He's on the list. He served part of his sentence in Full Sutton prison before he died in jail at Wakefield in 2012, aged 57. They seem to go from Full Sutton prison to Wakefield. Is that like the next, when they don't think they're so dangerous anymore? Donald Nielsen was in Full Sutton prison. Probably a lot of you will have heard of him. Oh, please, don't bark. Don't bark, or you have to go in the bathroom. Yeah, so do we know this guy? So this guy, oh, hang on, I haven't shared it. Let me just share it again. I haven't gone back to... Hang on, sorry. Right, let me go back. Let me just show you Colin Ireland again, because you might not have seen that because I wasn't sharing. So that was Colin Ireland. He's dead now, but I will do a video about him. These are all come under the British crime sort of genre. These are all British people, who killed, who weren't very nice people, homegrown killers, if you like. Donald Nielsen was the Black Panther. Now, if you're of my age group, you will remember the Black Panther. He shot dead 3 people in post office robberies between 1971 and 1974, and he murdered heiress Leslie Whittle in 1975. He earned his nickname when one of his victims' wives described him as so quick he was like a panther. He served part of his life sentence in Full Sutton prison before he died in jail, but we don't know which jail, in 2011, aged 75. Now, if you're from my neck of the woods, Manchester area, but maybe even anywhere, because this was a very famous case that was in the news, and you might remember him because of his eye. He's very distinctive. Dale Cregan. Just awful what he did, because he phoned the police and asked them to come round. There's a 999 call, that we can listen to, not like Paul Ansell's 999 call that for some reason is totally secret. We're allowed to listen to his, and he asked for the police to come round. These I think it was 2 women, 2 female police officers went round, and he just shot them. When they, so he phoned the police, asked them to come round, and then shot them. And he's a gangster. Manchester gangster Dale Cregan is serving a whole life term. So he, he's not getting out ever, for the murder of 2 female officers in 2012. Was actually going to start upsetting me, this, because these police officers, obviously had a grudge against the police, but these women had done nothing to him. He phoned the police, asked the police to come round, and then when they turned up at his doorstep, he shot them dead. He made a hoax call to police reporting a burglary, and he also threw a grenade at them. He almost killed 2 others. Mark Short, who was shot dead in a pub in Droylsden, Greater Manchester. He also killed 2 others. And Mr. Short's father, David, who was shot dead at his home. One-Eyed Cregan was also found guilty of attempting to murder 3 others. Part of his sentence has been served at Full Sutton, where he reportedly went on hunger strike in 2013. I'll tell you what, when they go on hunger strike, they should just let him die. Ian Brady was another one, wasn't he? Kept going on hunger strike. And the thing is, they have the prison officers, the police, they have a duty of care to these twonks. You must feel like, I'm surprised nobody's ever turned the other way when he's been sort of around, but I suppose people might be scared of attacking him because he's a bit of a tough man, and if he's got gangster connections on the outside world, people would be frightened, to do anything to him in case their family got hurt. I mean, I don't know, but I'm just presuming. So here we are now with Richard Huckle, pleaded guilty, 71 counts of sex abuse against 191 children. Bloody hell, over a 9-year period, some as young as 6 months old. And the thing is, this guy, he videoed what he did. That's how they caught him. A bit like Stephen Stearns, as I say. So what's happening these days is, there's proof now. These people have their own proof. They have their own photos. He'd uploaded images, suddenly, to the dark web, and his manual of how to be a P. Just disgusting. So he was ordered to serve a minimum sentence of 25 years. He had bragged on the dark web about his horrendous crimes against Malaysian children, some of whom were babies as young as 6 months old. I tell you what, those poor police that have to delve into these things, and also the poor people that have to be on the jury and look at these things. Years ago when I did jury duty in Reading, there was a case. I didn't get selected for this case, thank God. They come out and they select a jury, and I was refused. They didn't want me. They must have just told by the way I was looking at him, because it was child abuse against a baby. And while the court case was going on, and the rest of us were all sitting outside waiting to be called for our case, because when you do jury duty, you go in and the defendant or the lawyer of the defendant decides who to pick for the jury. And the ones who aren't picked, we go out and sit down and you wait for the next case and, see if you get picked for that one. And while we were outside waiting for the next case to come up, I'll never forget, this woman came out. She was hysterical, crying. She was one of the jury that had been picked, and she had to be excused. She just said, I can't do it. She'd seen the first couple of photos, and she said, I just cannot do it. So they had to pick somebody else. Anyway, Huckle had first visited Southeast Asia on a gap year aged 19 and returned masquerading as a teacher and a respectable Christian to infiltrate small and impoverished communities. Shared photos and videos of his assaults with P's worldwide, and had attempted to make a business out of his
that category. We're looking at how
by
we can help them through the
crowdfunding.
household support fund,
Crowdfunding.
so that we can
acknowledge messages. How can you crowdfund?
the most vulnerable.
Sure. Illegal.
Can you acknowledge that
Why
might
does
seem
Angela keep coming up on that? Anyway, he was even in the process of drafting a 60-page P manual at the time of his arrest. But his time at Full Sutton came to a brutal and sudden end when he was stabbed to death in his cell by fellow inmate Paul Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald tortured and abused him before strangling him. Oh, because he did that. So there wasn't much that you could say that he didn't do to him. He did everything to him. Now, these are really interesting ones, the last few. Stephen Grieveson. Now, I don't really know much about this case. He's a serial killer known as the Sunderland Strangler who murdered 4 teenage boys. I didn't know about this series of killings committed between 1990 and 94. Convicted of 3 counts of murder, 3 life sentences. Recommendation, he serves a minimum of 35 years. So he's in there. And then in October 2013, he was convicted of the murder of 14-year-old Simon Martin and handed a 4th life sentence. Now, this guy, I remember this little boy's little face looking out off the news, Daniel Pelka. And this twat, can't call him anything else, he is a twat. This guy, he murdered him. He was his stepfather, and he killed his 4-year-old stepson, Daniel Pelka, and Daniel was starved and beaten to death in a case that shocked the country. Also, he's been found dead there as well. He was found dead at Full Sutton Prison in January 2016. Oh my God. Kresolek was sentenced to life with a minimum of 13 years alongside little Dan. Look at his little face. How could they? Kresolek was sentenced to life with a minimum of 30 years alongside Daniel's mum, Magdalena, and she killed herself in prison in 2015. Did she though? That's it quite often when you hear of these people. I don't know how she did it, but if she, you wonder, did they do it, or did the prison guards or the prisoners have something to do with it? Kresolek was found dead in his cell at Full Sutton after suffering a heart attack. Did he though? Curtis Warren. Now, I don't know this guy. He's a drug dealer. He amassed such a fortune from his illegal activities, he once appeared on the Sunday Times Rich List, jailed for 13 years for plotting to smuggle £1 million of cannabis into Jersey. Well, there's not much going on in Jersey, so they were probably gutted when the cannabis didn't get there. Anyway, he was later handed another 10-year sentence for failing to pay back 198 million he was suspected of making through crime. I'm just not sure how he's supposed to do that if he's in prison, but so once he was on Interpol's Most Wanted, now he's 55, he's served part of his sentence at Full Sutton. Oh my God, he moved to HMP Belmarsh in 2020. Stephanie Smithwhite, a prison officer, was jailed for 2 years after having intimate relations with him. Seem to hear about this a lot. Did you hear about that other prison officer that they filmed? Anyway, never mind. John Cannan, now he's one of the most prolific serial killers that we sort of don't know about. He's the prime suspect in the murder of Susie Lamplugh. He's serving 3 life sentences with a minimum of 35 years. So he's only 62. God, I would have thought he was older than that because he seems to have been on, my crime radar forever. So I thought he would be older than that. So this was done in 2021, so he'll now be 64. Yeah, he was around, God, it's quite scary because he was around at Reading at the time I was in Reading. So he was sentenced for the murder of a woman, attempting to kidnap a woman in Bristol in 87 and raping a woman in Reading in 86. And he's named as the prime suspect in the notorious murder of Susie Lamplugh. I have done a video about him, who vanished in London in 1986. Oh my God, he still protests his innocence. Oh my God, that's right, he came up for parole, but he didn't get it. Anyway, these are terrorists. These are some terrorists that are in full Sutton prison. Are they still there? Oh, do you remember this? Yeah, I remember this because while the police were looking for them, they shot dead an innocent man, didn't they? Jean-Charles de Menezes, who was on the tube at the time. And the police sort of overreacted, to try and, they were looking for these men and killed poor Jean-Charles by accident, if you like, or an error. Anyway, they got them, and they've been sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 40 years. That's good. Part of which they've served at full Sutton. Another terrorist, Omar Khayyam, he's a famous poet as well, Omar Khayyam. He's there. I don't know how long he got. Darren Osborne, I don't know who he is. He's been identified as the alleged driver who ploughed through Muslim worshippers. So he's the opposite. So you've got the terrorists, the Muslim terrorists, and then you've got this guy, which has disappeared. Hang on. He's been attacked in prison as well, by the sound of it. So he's serving a 43-year minimum sentence for the terrorist attack. So this is terrorism on the other side of it. So that killed one man, Makrim Ali, and injured 9 others in June 2017. He drove a van into people leaving a mosque in Finsbury Park. And he may lose his sight in one eye forever. Where's it gone? But I hate it when it jumps around like this. After a brutal attack by a fellow inmate, God, it seems like there's loads of bloody attacks at Full Sutton. He was left with permanent damage to his right eye after he was stabbed by convicted murderer Patrick Chandler in an unprovoked attack on a prison sports pitch. Chandler used a blade fashioned from a sharpened wooden tool to stab him in the head, arm and torso, attacking him so violently that the weapon snapped in his hand, leaving part of it in his forehead. Oh my God. So basically, I think you've got to hope that if you ever have to go to prison, that you don't go to prison there, because you're not safe. You cannot rely on the bloody prison guards to save you, because it sounds like they just leave you to it, especially if you're a P like Richard Huckle. 90 minutes. 90 minutes allowed to attack Richard Huckle without anybody doing anything. I mean, that's just not going to happen, is it? Don't they have CCTV in these? Surely they have in their cells and things. Don't they have cameras? So yeah, if you're planning on doing anything, don't go to Full Sutton prison. Don't do anything too serious. You don't want to end up there, because it's horrible. And that they're only like high profile sort of things we've been looking at. But apparently in Full Sutton prison, when I was researching it earlier, there's loads of instances of violent things that happen that are recorded, and these riots and lots of different things. But anyway, the main thing that we were talking about tonight, and I want to know all your opinions. What do you think? So when Richard Huckle, met his karma, if you like, met his match. I mean, Richard Huckle had abused vulnerable children, from the age of 6-month-old babies, and he got away with it. And maybe as far as we know, didn't actually murder any of them, but he abused them severely, recorded the abuse. He kept a manual. He was writing a manual that he was providing on the dark web. And you know why nobody suspected him for all that time that he got away with it? It's because he was a young middle-class white male from a good background, Christian. You know, people have these ideas of what monsters look like. And we know from this channel, from the cases that we follow, monsters can look like anything, anyone. And in fact, I think the worst monsters are the normal looking ones, and they get away with it for longer because people don't suspect them. You know, if somebody sort of looks like scary and has tattoos all over and comes, you know, from a rough background or whatever, people are immediately suspicious. But this guy got away with it because he had a CELTA bloody teaching certificate that, you know, I'm sorry, but then it's just like a Mickey Mouse thing in my eyes. It's nothing spectacular. I mean, I shouldn't say that because you know, it is at the end of the day a certificate. It is, you know, people have to pass, you know, to get it. But it's not like, you know, it's not like having a degree or, you know, having a doctorate or something like that. It's literally something you can do online, and it doesn't take very long. And then he used that to go off, you know, abusing kids, and also his position in the church. So he used the fact he was an educator, and he used the fact that he was some sort of Christian missionary, and a photographer, of course. So it's easy, isn't it, to go around these places, impress them with your online presence, take photos, make videos. They think it's great. Nobody would suspect you, middle-class young lad from Britain, you know, from an exemplary background. Who would suspect you? And he won't be the only one. There's probably loads of them out there doing it as we speak. He was just, unfortunately for him, caught. But how many others were doing it? And it makes me wonder, because the church, and see, he went to work at orphanages and things like that. They didn't really want to talk about it afterwards. And I think, well, you know, is it some sort of P ring? You know, how did he end up going to these particular places? We know he was on the dark web, so he was in contact. He was in contact with lots of other Ps. You know, that's unfortunately something that the internet has enabled, hasn't it? You know, years ago, you might have been a P, but you wouldn't have been able to connect with any other Ps, you know, maybe in your local area. But how could you really? I bet it was a very solitary life being a P, you know, years ago before the internet. But now they've come together just like we've come together. So it's got its positive things. You know, we've come together on this channel as a community, and that's a good thing. But there's other communities out there that aren't so healthy, are they, or not so nice? You know, and the internet can be a very nasty place as well as a very nice place. It's quite difficult to cope with sometimes, isn't it? The nastiness of it. But I'm talking with this guy, you're talking about extreme nastiness. And then he met his match, of course, when he was in prison. He met a person who was nastier than him, you know, and Paul Fitzgerald, not a child that he could, you know, not a child that he could manipulate or dominate. In fact, the opposite. Paul Fitzgerald did it to him. And, you know, was that karma? Because, of course, we don't have the death penalty in Britain. So there are places where Richard Huckle would have got the death penalty for what he did. Florida is one of them. He would get, you know, in the USA, it doesn't matter if you kill someone or not, just for that abuse that he did. He could have had the death penalty. But he got the death penalty in a different way. So I'll be interested to hear what your thoughts are. So, as far as Paul Fitzgerald's concerned, he's just never coming out of prison. I mean, he had not only had a history of offending, but he had a lot of mental health issues. He had gender issues. He had, you name it, he had it. So he didn't have the same life that Richard had, where Richard's life was a veneer of respectability. Paul's wasn't. Paul's life was, always a difficult life. But Richard, he was someone who got put everything on a plate, but he took it and he used his what can I say, his privilege. He used it in a bad way. And he wasn't from a single parent family, because as you know, I get a bit touchy about single parents. He wasn't. These were two parents. I've been told by psychologists that the worst cases they've seen are from two parent families. It's all, the thing is, there's twonks in every walk of life. It doesn't matter what their situation is. I'm sure that all adds to it. Obviously doesn't help if you come from a difficult background. But that sort of thing is either in you or it isn't. You either do that or you don't. Lots of people get dragged up and they don't go and do the things that Richard Huckle did, whereas he had, a good life, a good home life. I mean, we don't know what happened behind the scenes. Who knows? He may have been abused himself for all we know. But, he never said that he was. There's no documented evidence of that, either from him or anyone else. So we have to presume that he didn't. So, see, my opinion is when, and it's not only my opinion, it's fact. Child abusers will gravitate towards jobs around children. Of course they will. They're not, their whole purpose in life is to get in a position where they can abuse children, have the opportunity to abuse children. So they go to be teachers. Says me who's a teacher. It's scary, really, because it's awful. I think, especially for men, and as I say, it's not only men that abuse children. I know that, but it tends to be mainly men. So it must be quite worrying for a man to become a teacher, because does he think that everybody's going to be looking at him and thinking, "Oh, Seffi, sorry, I've only just seen that. Thank you so much. Oh, Seffi, I hope you're still here and you didn't think I was being ignorant. Did I miss that? Sorry, I was probably in my, spiel, in my spiel going on as I do, having a little rant." But yeah, people who want to abuse children, they will find a job that brings them close to children. It just makes sense, doesn't it? They will go they'll be teachers, or they'll find some sort of job in a school or an entertainment park, or, that's what they'll do, because or they'll, like Stephen Stearns, that I think he did. I mean, I know he worked in Disney for a while, but I think he probably deliberately chose Jen Soto because she had a little girl. That's what they do. They pick jobs, pick partners, pick opportunities where they can be around children. That's what they do, unfortunately. So the thing is, then we also, start looking at everyone sideways. It's because of you, why are they working with children? Are they a P? And of course, not everybody is. I do feel sorry for men in that sense. I have a student who is married to a man, and that they have a child, And, he said, sometimes it's awful, like when you're at the park and, they're trying to get their child into the car because it's time to go home. But of course, you know what kids are like. So their son is 3. And he's like, I don't want to go home, Daddy. He's like, no. And he starts screaming. And he says, sometimes I think, God, what do they think? There's me and my partner, like 2 men sort of manhandling this child into the car. And people but nobody's ever stopped them. But, people are probably looking at them and thinking, where are those men taking that child? So it's a shame, really, isn't it? It's awful, really. But, I mean, I've been through that, to be honest, in the suit. I'm sure you all have, any of you out there who've got kids or had kids. When they do that tantrum in the supermarket, it's just like, I mean, I remember years before I had kids, seeing a woman in the supermarket and her son was having an absolute Benny on the floor, like, 2 or 3, that awful time that they go through. And she'd been trying to calm him down. And in the end, she just went, oh, stay there then. And just walked off with her trolley and left this kid screaming in the middle of Waitrose, I think it was. And I remember thinking, gosh, that's terrible. What a terrible mother. But, fast forward a few years, and then my son's doing it. They always do it in the supermarket, don't they? It's like with the supermarkets, like when they're little, and you can't leave them at home because they're too young to be left at home, because obviously you can't leave your 2-3-year-old at home while you go shopping. And so you have to go through it, or they go there, they want a drink of something, they want, I want that one, and you're having to give them a something to sort of chomp on while you're going around. Then you get into trouble off the bloody supermarket saying, no, you're not supposed to open things before you get to the till. So you go through all that, and then when they get old enough to help, then they don't want to come. It's like, oh, will you come to the supermarket and help me out with the shopping? No, I don't want to come. I'll just stay here and do my PlayStation. So that's just how it is. So when they can't help and they hinder you, and you wish you could leave them at home, you can't leave them at home. And then when they get to an older age where you probably could leave them at home, or, they don't want to come, they won't come, and they don't want to help. So anyway, there you go. That's life. But it's all part of the fun of having children. Oh, so I hope Seffi is still there to see that. I did say thank you. I'm not thinking that was being rude and not saying thank you. I hate the thought of that. But thank you so much, Seffi. Okay, so that's it. I just wanted to tell you about that because, quite often we hear of people going off to foreign countries and doing these sort of things. And we've just got to be wary sometimes. Are their intentions in the right place or aren't they? So, just to be aware, Oh dear. Stop it. Now, just looking at what Audbod says there, I don't get into the Lucy Letby thing just because it's babies and try to avoid, those kind of subjects. Personally, I think she's probably guilty, to be honest, but I don't know enough about the case. And I don't, to be perfectly honest, I'm not going to be researching it either because I know that I will find it too upsetting. But I know that there is, there's a contingent of people who don't think she's guilty, but I'm not one of them. Let's just put it that way. But everyone has their views. But the thing is, she was found guilty. So if she wants to say she wasn't guilty, then I suppose it's a question of, it's up to a lawyer, isn't it, to sort that out, get a new trial organised, try and sort of get her off if she is innocent. But I don't know. I don't know what people in general think about it. As I say, I haven't really looked into it enough to make an informed comment. But just what I have done, I did do a video about Lucy Letby when she was sentenced, when she was found guilty and sentenced. But I haven't done a deep dive, let's say, into Lucy, because just the thought of it all. But I did feel that when she was arrested, she looked like she knew what they were there for, that's all. I only go, sometimes, all you can do is go on your feelings. If you don't know the ins and outs of something, you tend to see someone, you get an impression, but of course you're not always right. I've had impressions of people and been wrong, but normally I'm right. But what else can I do but that? As I say, I'm not going to research it because I think I find it too distressing. But anyway, so I'm just going to have a look actually who actually won the memberships. Where's my members thing? Oh, there you go. Michelle will be happy. Michelle J. Oudbod, and Tracy Smith, Kalisa, and Amy the Problem Child. Congratulations. Because Sephi, who's very kind, who quite often gives memberships, but I don't think you are a member, are you, Sephi? Why don't you give yourself a membership? It'd be nice to see you in the members' lives. But there you go. So you're the people, you have won a membership or gained a membership, been gifted a membership from Sephi. And we'll greet you properly on Tuesday because it's a Carry On Chatting membership as well. So great. Jim. Well, the membership that Jim won a few weeks ago hasn't expired yet, David. So I'm sure as soon as his membership expires again, he'll get awarded another one. Jim's the lucky, after it taking ages to get that membership for Jim. Do you remember that? That was hilarious, that live. I think that's the funniest live we've ever had. And it took so many people trying to throw memberships at Jim, and he finally got one. And ever since then, he's had loads. Okay, I'm going. So I'll see you tomorrow, 100%. So, because I'm hoping that I'll get the audio, the Jen Soto audio, the new audio. I'm hoping that I'll get that tomorrow. So hopefully we'll be able to listen to that together. But at some point tomorrow, I'll be on talking about some old crap. Oh, I'm only joking. I'll be talking about some important case tomorrow. We like to have a chat, don't we? Now, I hope you've enjoyed this. It's funny, isn't it, when I say enjoy as far as true crime is concerned, I always feel a bit bad because, obviously, true crime just by its nature means that somebody... Oh, yeah. Hey, I don't even know what she's got. Come here. Not sure even what she's looking at me. Shh. Just let me say good night properly. Oh, these fireworks. Our fiestas have started. So these fireworks going off, there'll be no quietening her down if it's fireworks because they make her nervous. But anyway, so yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. And so what I was saying was, I always feel guilty sort of saying, I hope you enjoyed that. But you know what I mean. I hope you found it interesting, illuminating, thought-provoking. And these people should never be forgotten, like the victims should never be forgotten. Obviously, I can't go through Richard Huckle's victims because there were 200 of them, it's thought. So, you can't go through them individually. but at least we can show up, you know, his story and be careful of other people that might be doing the same thing. Okay, so I'll see you really soon in the next video. And until then, may your God go with you. Bye.